So the first question I had was, will there be a time when we can add a student after the deadline? What is the drop dead deadline for 2018-2019? I kind of had to do some generalizations with what I thought that meant. So I'm going to show my PowerPoint slide. And I'm going to minimize this. Okay, so for KRA, November 1st at 11:59 is the deadline for teachers to administer and enter data into the KReady system. It closes at that point. However, data managers have until November 6th at 11:59 to do any data cleanup, which would include student transfers, etc. With that. When it comes to the early learning assessment, first off, there is no requirement to use the KReady system. But if you're choosing to use the KReady system, administrators set the deadline for when all data needs to be entered into the system while considering the assessment and reporting windows. So programs are required to report fall and spring assessment ratings for ECE funded and PSE funded children. And the fall assessment window is August 15th through November 14th. And the spring assessment window is February 15th through May 14th. So that's for ELA, it's a local decision when your data manager wants you to have all those scores in so they can pull the reports that are required. That's that question. My next question that I had was, what is being done with the data that is entered into the KReady system? So ELA data managers utilize the teacher data that is entered to pull either a learning progression score report for ELA or the scale score report for KRA. The data pulled is submitted to EAS or EMIS for ELA for children who are funded through the Early Childhood Education Grant or Preschool Special Education. The data pulled is submitted to EMIS for KRA. So that's what happens when the data is entered into the KReady system. It's a place where your data managers can access that information and pull it for submission, but also pull it to analyze data on a local level to set goals and improve instruction. Okay, and I know we also had a question. I know Scott West had a question about this, our next topic, and I don't have a slide for it. It's more of a conversation. It's one of those ones where you just kind of have to talk through. So who should load the students placed in the DD school? And then we had another question that tied with that one directly that said, how does it work if a student is enrolled in a public school district but served by another school district? So there's two areas with this, because for KRA, it's kind of complicated, because if a student is placed by a district into an outside agency for services, the big thing you have to remember is that the school district of residence is responsible for that information for that student. However, it could be placed in a contract agreement that you have with the outside agency that they perform all the educational responsibilities, including the KRA or the ELA. So it could be the DD, it could be the school district that enters those teachers, students, and enrollment. The big thing is, either way, is it has to be a trained teacher administering the assessment. And ultimately, it's going to come back to the school district of residence if the data gets submitted for either KRA or ELA if the students are ECE funded or PSE funded. So we really encourage school districts and external programs to have a nice discussion and talk about what works best to share that information between the organization that might be providing the instruction and the school district of residence. But ultimately, the big thing is that it's going to come back on the school district of residence that information is submitted into EMIS. So we really encourage open conversation and what works best for the district and the outside organization. I don't know if that made that clearer or made that more difficult to understand. As always, if you have any policy questions, a lot of time situations vary from school district and organization, you are always more than welcome to contact myself or Elizabeth Saylor in the Office of Early Learning and School Readiness to kind of talk some of those scenarios through. My next question is, what do I do with students who went into kindergarten this year? Do I delete them? The big thing is that in the KReady system, data is archived each year, so students need to be loaded each year. So if you had a bunch of preschool students who went on to kindergarten, so they're still kind of in the KReady system, those students will be loaded again for their KRA data collection, and they'll have a different data collection token this year. So since data is archived each year, students will need to be loaded each year. A big question that I always get is, what is the best way to handle repeaters? Should we delete them, then inactivate? The big thing is, especially for repeaters that get put in on student rosters, you can unenroll a retained kindergarten student from the KReady system. The big thing is that you do not administer the kindergarten readiness assessment to retained students. And it can be a retained student who was from another state. That's a big one that I've gotten a lot this year with questions. So the best way to handle them is make sure that they are not given the assessment. And when your student data is loaded into EMIS for reporting, those students are coded as retained students. So EMIS will know not to expect a KRA score for those students. Next policy question. I'm also checking my questions. Okay, so no one, I'm looking at questions as they're coming in. Okay, I'm going to go over my last two questions, and then I know we're going to come to a point where we're going to share some more of the questions that have come through. One of the questions is someone at the state level reviewing the data, and who? So KRA data is shared annually via ODE's website. With ELA data, that's a little more complicated because currently we are working through reviewing it, and we will make sure we update the field when it's in a more shareable format. We have such a small amount of data that's collected for those students, with two different populations that we're working through to find the best way to share that with the public. And then my last question that I received policy-wise was, if you do not have access to one of your centers, how do you add this location? I didn't quite understand. I'm assuming this is an ELA question, but with this one, again, if you have a specific question that pertains to your local issue, contact either myself or Elizabeth Saylor here at the department so we can kind of talk through that.